What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badgers. Spicy takes today, including did Paul Chryst waste Jonathan Taylor's college career? Upside for Stephen Crowl. We got a lot to talk about from your comments, your thoughts, and your questions on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go right now.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. Thank you for making this one of your first listens every day. It is your team every single day, and I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in, everybody kind of helping to build up the show. It's very appreciated, and it's very humbling as always, so thank you for that. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It is the sportsbook that we use here. Go to FanDuel.com to check out what they have to offer. All right. One of the things we talk about a lot in this show, and I always say, like, I want to get more of your comments, more of your questions. I never get to them all in the live show, and I always end up apologizing, and I always end up saying, I'm going to get to those later, I promise. And then I never really fully do. I'm doing it today because I want to make good on that. Because, again, I think the strength of this community we're building and the show that we're building is the community around it. And there's really insightful, incredible takes from people who join the live show, people who leave YouTube comments, people who jump in on Twitter with DMs. So I want to just get to a bunch of those today and just run through them because there's really interesting talking points that come up through the course of conversations in a live show that we just don't get to. So we're just going to roll through a bunch of them today. And I think there's some really interesting takes. There's football, basketball, Jonathan Taylor, Tanner Mordecai, Stephen Crowl, Noah Reynolds. There's all sorts of stuff to talk about today on today's Locked On Badgers. Let's get into it. First comment here. We're just going to roll through them. This is from Adam Berger talking about the Noah Reynolds. Solid bench pickup. Yeah, like that's the thing with Reynolds is he's a single. I think you hit a single, maybe a double with Noah Reynolds if you're Greg Gard. He's not a home run. And I talked about this on the show previously, and I need to dive deeper into him. I'm going to try to reach out to somebody on the Wyoming staff as well, see if I can get them on the show, talk about his game a little deeper. So I'm going to try to dive deeper into Reynolds and his game. I don't think, and I said this yesterday, and I still believe it, I don't think he's a ceiling raiser, Noah Reynolds. I don't think he dramatically takes you from a team that doesn't make the tournament to a team who's a Sweet 16 Elite 8 team. But what I think he does is he addresses one of your big weaknesses from the last 2 years, which is what, ladies and gentlemen? It's bench scoring. What have we talked about for 2 calendar years with this team? Nobody can come off the bench and get a bucket, right? This guy can do that a little bit. He addresses that concern. He addresses that issue. I think he gives you some size, some craftiness. So I like the pickup. He makes the team better. That's the goal of every transfer, right? Does he make the team better? Checkbox, yes or no? Yes. Reynolds makes the team better. He makes them deeper. He makes them a better scoring team. He just doesn't dramatically lift the ceiling, which is something that we still really kind of need to see Gard do this offseason. He needs to bring in my opinion, an athletic difference maker. And it doesn't have to be an athletic star, but somebody to upgrade the athleticism on this team. Reynolds, I don't think, is that guy. But he's still a good player that's going to fit into rotation. I think he's your sixth man next year, depending on what else happens in the portal. And that's a really valuable piece. Your sixth man is playing 20, 25, 30 minutes a game at times, right? So your sixth man is like you know what your sixth man is? If you want to tie it into football, he's like your slot corner, and your slot corner plays 60% of the snaps, right? Your sixth man plays a lot. He's like a quasi starter. So I think it upgrades the floor and it helps the depth, which has been a massive issue on this team. All right, let's keep going here. Derek says, let's see here. Let's get some football stuff too. David Wagner says, wonder if Tressel will use the press quarters coverage Michigan State made popular during his time as an assistant under Pat Narduzzi. That's from David Wagner. I think Tressel's interesting to me because he feels like he's a younger assistant that has experience in a lot of different ecosystems, right? And in the Michigan State ecosystem under Pat Narduzzi, they famously kind of had that no-fly zone at Michigan State, some really talented defensive backs. They played, as David Wagner says, this kind of press quarters coverage, where, there was a very Michigan State style of defense that he got a lot of experience under. But then he went to Cincinnati and he played a different way. And now he's coming into Wisconsin. That is a different defensive philosophy with the players that are acclimated and attuned to what Jim Leonhard was doing. So I think he's going to mesh a lot of that. And we've already seen some of it, right? We've seen a 3-2-6. We've seen a 2-down lineman. We've seen the safeties roving up like Hunter Wolder and kind of that Viper role that Michigan's always made popular. So I think you're going to see a lot of different looks under Tressel. Now, how good are they going to be? Like I'm telling you, defense might be the question mark this year, which is still wild to me. Absolutely wild to me, when that has been the hallmark of Wisconsin for a long time. Derek said, can we just win some darn games by 10 plus points and not skate by garbage teams? Yeah, that would be nice next year. That's something Justin hit on too, right? Like we have to start putting away the bad teams. And they just haven't been able to do it for 2 years. So yeah, they need to play better basketball, prettier basketball. I hope that next year they're able to do that. I think next year's going to be a better team. Let's just be honest. Now, I don't find many people that disagree with that statement. Please let me know if you do. Because again, this is a show for opinions and differences of opinions that we can chop up. But next year is going to be a better team. It's just a matter of how much better, right? That's where the biggest question continues to come up for Badger fans. Logan Couch says, Connor needs to get his 3-point shooting prowess back and not overthink it. He needs to simplify his shot. Logan, thank you for the comment. And thank you for everybody that's been in the comments so far. I really do appreciate it. And this is a way to get you into the show and get your voices up here, because I think that's an important part of what we do. I think his shot's simple enough, Logan. I think as the season went on, so Connor started off gangbusters, right? And then what happened, right? As the season went on, defenses adjusted. He got more and more defensive attention, and he started playing more and more minutes. So the combination of those two things, I think, takes a toll. And then he hit a slump. So now you're playing more minutes, more is being asked of you. Defenses are much more hyper-focused on what you're doing, right? If you go back to the Kansas game where he banged a couple shots, Kansas wasn't keyed in on him. Kansas was keyed in on Tyler Wall and Chucky Hepburn. Now, at the end of the year, like it's the Connor Essegian, we can't let that dude beat us from the perimeter show. And you saw him adjust, right? You saw him take it to the rack more. You saw him more in a mid-range role, but the shooting numbers dropped off. Some of that was they were running him off the line. And when they weren't running him off the line, they were forcing him to shoot over outstretched hands, right? Make tough shots. And I think that's really the biggest issue there. I know some people said he was worn down. I tend to think some of that is probably true. I tend to think more of that is he was being forced into tougher shots. I really believe that's more of what happened towards the end of the year. Let's see. This is a comment from, I don't think this is actually from Gus Yalden. Maybe, I don't know. I think this comment came up as Gus Yalden, but Gus seems like he could be the next Brad Davison. I hope so. I don't actually think this is from Gus Yalden. I think I actually copied and pasted that. So I think what they're talking about here is the next Brad Davison for Gus Yalden, a defensive or a team leader, a multi-year guy, somebody who is going to come in and really immediately put their stamp on the program. And I think Gus can do all those things. I really do. I'm super high in the Gus train. I've talked about it a bunch. I was before he committed. I was bummed for a while, I thought he wasn't committing. I think he's going to play next year. I think he's going to play right away. I think he's going to be an impactful rotation player. And we had Jason Jordan, the Sports Illustrated recruiting director, on. He raved about Gus. He said, my expectation for him next year is at least 10 points a game, because that's the type of guy he is. So I'm excited for what he brings. And for everybody who is kind of down on Gus for the lack of elite athleticism in the front court, listen, that's a valid concern. He's not the elite athlete that some of the super springy 4 and 5 star skinny, gazelle type forwards are. But what he's going to be able to do is kind of bury them in the post, because he has bulk. He has footwork. He has a lot of basketball IQ to him. So I'm excited for Gus. I think he's going to play right away. I think the Brad Davison comp is a good one, actually. Bo Dragon says, Kaminsky is a pro. Crowl is nowhere near that talent. So this comes from, there's been some weird comparisons between like Crowl being able to make a Kaminsky-like jump. I got it. Those comparisons are crazy. Okay. I don't even know where those started. It's first of all, it's unfair to Stephen Crowl, because Kaminsky is kind of a 101. I mean, National Player of the Year type guy. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, for goodness sake. Stephen Crowl's not that. And that's not a knock on Stephen Crowl, because very few college basketball players are ever that, right? So no, that comparison is silly. It shouldn't be made. Stephen Crowl is not going to make a Kaminsky-like jump. He's not that fluid of an athlete. He's not that skilled of a shooter. It just is what it is. And that's, again, not a knock on Crowl. He's a really solid pivot man. He's not an NBA lottery pick, right? So, yeah, I agree, Bo. That's a weird take that I see occasionally. He's not going to make that jump. Now, really quickly, that doesn't mean he can't make a jump, right? That doesn't mean he can't be a little more consistent next year with his footwork. I think he could be more physical in the post. He can certainly shoot better, right? I certainly believe he can shoot better. So, maybe he's a more consistent 12, 13, 14-point scorer next year with better shooting percentages. That wouldn't shock me, but he's not making a Kaminsky-like jump. We just got to be real with that one. All right, let's go to a quick break here. We're going to come back with a hot take on Paul Chryst and Jonathan Taylor. We're coming back with that on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get the no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, three-pointers drained. Plus, you can combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. And listen, it's not just basketball, right? College football betting is coming up. And one of my favorite bets right now, Iowa, the over-under on the win totals out there on FanDuel, it is 8.5. I would take the under on that. 8.5 is a lot for an Iowa team that I don't think fixed their offense. I don't think McNamara is the answer to Iowa's anemic offense when their coaching staff remains. They have to go to Wisconsin. They have to go to Penn State. They have to go to Iowa State. I don't think they're getting to 9 wins. I would take the under on that. So don't miss your chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And when you're done here, go to www.lockedonpodcast.com/newsletter. Sign up for your free NFL draft newsletter. An incredible amount of information on the draft, every team, every major prospect for free. All right, let's keep going here on this show. Bunch more fan comments we want to get to, listener comments. And again, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. This is why we do this, to just elevate the discussion in the community and to get more of your voices on. So let's keep going here. Another one here from Don't Badger Me. We need consistency from Steve. Talking about Crowl again. He's been great at times and silent at others. That's it, right? You just need him to be more consistent. Like, we saw flashes, but we also saw moments where the game engulfed him, right? Where Greg Gard had to challenge him. And that's frustrating when you're talking about a junior. You're talking about a guy that's been in the program for a minute. You don't, at that point, want your head coach still having to challenge you to be more physical. So what is he next year? It's a great question, right? If he can shoot a little bit better and just be a little more consistent, neither of which to me are huge stretches, he's an upper echelon Big Ten center. And that's a pretty good start to kind of continue to build your team around. But if he remains the same guy, then two things, right? If he remains the same guy, you're going to struggle again against the dominant post players. But your need for a backup post player is magnified even more if Crowl can't take another step. So I don't know. I don't know if you're going to get a lot more consistency, to be honest. I don't doubt his work ethic. He put a lot of weight on in the offseason, but I don't really fully trust the shot. So we'll have to see. Let's keep going here. Talking about Noah Reynolds, the transfer, Zach Bart says injuries, especially concussions, are a concern. Yeah, he had 3 concussions. They shut him down. Now, concussions in basketball feels different than concussions in football or concussions in soccer. It feels flukier, but yeah, I don't know. Like, what if he gets a fluke one next year and that's your 4th concussion? How long do you sit? And you got to put the athlete's welfare 100%, like at the forefront, right? They're young men. You want them to live a long and healthy life. So if those concussions do rack up, that's absolutely a concern, Zach. I agree. This is an interesting comment right here from David Wagner. He said, Paul Chryst wasted Jonathan Taylor's college career. I don't know if I agree with that, David. It's interesting. So I would say you could look at this from a couple aspects. I imagine you're looking at this from the aspect of you had this incredible running back and you could never surround him with the talent he deserved to be at the highest stages, right? You never gave him a passing game to complement him. You could also look at it, though, when you say wasted Jonathan Taylor's college career. You didn't say the teams he was on, right? Jonathan Taylor had 6,100 yards and was an NFL draft pick. So I think you can argue Paul Chryst maximized Jonathan Taylor's individual college career, right? He saved him from going to Rutgers. Like, what if Wisconsin doesn't come in with an offer? What if, I think it was John Settle at the time, correct? What if Settle doesn't come in and lure him to Wisconsin? He goes to Rutgers and then he's not in this type of pro style offense. He's what does his career become then? You could argue Paul Chryst saved Jonathan Taylor's college career. Now, certainly the interesting point here is, what if Taylor had been surrounded by a more efficient passing game, right? It's you never know. You'll never know, but certainly he wouldn't have put up better numbers. The team, though, could have been a lot better for sure. It's an interesting point. Mitchell Lee says, Mitchell, thank you for jumping in. Keontae Lewis will make plays. He's forgotten because of all the other receiver hype. I love Keontae Lewis, right? He led the Badgers in yards per catch last year, I believe. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was like 16 yards per catch, something like that. True deep threat. You see the size and the speed. In the Brady Collins miles per hour testing numbers, Keontae is one of the highest guys up there typically. He's a burner. He's somebody that Brady Collins, when I talked to him, singled out as a burner. And he's somebody that even in last year's kind of anemic passing offense, we saw get behind the secondary. We saw make big plays. So it's easy to project him into this Phil Longo offense and say he's going to have more space. All right. He's going to get more opportunities. Even with more weapons around him, he's going to get more opportunities. So, yeah, I certainly would not write off Keontae Lewis. I think he's a stud. He's just another one of these. You look at the weapons Longo has at his disposal, and it's hard to – a lot of people seem to get lost in the hype, right? I feel like CJ Williams is getting lost in the hype. I feel like Bryson Green has been forgotten about. I feel like Quincy Burrows, we don't even talk about anymore. And he's a 6'2", 200-pound kid who runs like a 4.5. Nobody's even mentioning Tretchke Kahuna anymore. And we love him on Locked On Badgers, right? People have kind of forgotten about DK. So, yeah, it's a loaded room. But Keontae Lewis, to your point, should definitely not be forgotten about. Wanted to get to this comment here this one's from Leroy James. See if I can find it quick. Oh, where did this comment go? Here we go. You've been hyping Braden Locke for months. It seems you have an axe to grind concerning Evers. Seems you were trying to write him off already after 4 practices. Leroy, as always, man, appreciate the comments. I am absolutely, if it comes off that way, I apologize. If it comes off that way, I am absolutely not trying to write off Nick Evers. I've a couple times said he is the prototype athletically. I think he is probably the best army. Well, he's the best athletic combination on the roster, right? Speed, size, 6'3", great arm, really productive in high school. You love the pedigree of going to Oklahoma. So there's another quarterback heavy, quarterback productive school that believed in him out of high school. The high school recruiting rankings will bear that talent out. So no, I don't want it to sound like I'm writing Evers off at all. I think my viewpoint has been slightly different than a lot of people, though. I think a lot of people get enamored with the size, speed, arm strength of an Evers, and it kind of led them to overlook Braden Locke. And I've been higher on Braden Locke out of that kind of grouping. I think he has a lot of poise, a really good arm. And the fact that he came in and kind of cemented the number 2 job already, I guess that just didn't surprise me. That's kind of what I expected. And I felt that was a little against the grain from a lot of people that thought Evers would be that guy. So, but no, listen, next year is going to be a whole new battle. And I don't expect Evers to go anywhere. I expect Evers to be in that battle. And the other thing I'd say is I have no favorites in this battle. I don't have a personal connection with either of them. Neither of them have been on the show. I have no betting favorite here in terms of who I want to succeed. I just want the best quarterback. So if that does end up being Evers, let's go. Let's ride with Nick. If it ends up being Braden Locke, let's go. If it ends up being Cole or Crew, let's get it. If it ends up being Miles Burkett, on board, right? If it ends up being Marshall Howell, let's go Marshall. So that's where I'm at with the quarterbacks. I think Braden Locke gets overlooked because of the physical tools of Evers, but I am absolutely not writing off Nick Evers and the physical skills that he brings to the quarterback room. All right, let's take a really quick break here. Come back with a bunch more of your comments, including some interesting basketball ones and some Believe with Rajiv love. We're going to come back with that on today's Locked On Badgers. But first, a very quick break for our friends of the show. All right, welcome back to Locked On Badgers. As always, my friends, really do appreciate it. If you like the show, hit the subscribe button. It does help. It really actually does help support us as a show, as a platform. I know that every podcast says that, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. but it actually really does help. It's interesting being on this side of the microphone and seeing kind of the results of that. So really would appreciate it if you like the show, hit the subscribe button, hit the review button. If not, no worries. There's a lot of great Badger content out there, and sports content is like a buffet. There should be something for everyone, and all should be welcome. So a lot of great content out there. I do appreciate all y'all for tuning into this one. All right, let's keep going here. This is from Ryan23791. That's a lot of Ryans. This is about the Noah Reynolds commit. He said, no idea about how this works out. Doesn't excite me, though. Yeah, there's a couple comments regarding Reynolds in that vein, and I get it. There's another one from Commandant Klink, who basically says the same thing, not a super exciting pickup with Reynolds. And I would agree with that. That's kind of what I said in the first segment. He feels like a single, like he feels like maybe a double. He feels like somebody that helps you on the edges. I do think with Reynolds, there's some interesting stuff here. Okay, he's 6'3", long arms. When you watch him in the paint, he can finish with his left or the right. He's good in transition. He's really got some craftiness around the rim, which I like. The ability to finish at the rim has been a big issue for us this year. I think he helps address that. I think he gives us another ball handler. I've talked about how much I love Chucky Hepburn off the ball, where he can spot up and really be that just sniper. Having a guy like this maybe helps in that aspect, maybe pushes Hepburn off the ball a little bit more. So listen, I like all of that, but there are some issues here. High turnover rate, poor free throw shooter for a guard, 66%. So it didn't shoot particularly well from three last year, 32%. And defensively, I talked about it. Some of his metrics, I got to dig deeper. I promise you I will. But the metrics I've seen so far aren't great defensively for him either. So, yeah, I feel like it's a good pickup. But I agree with Ryan that it's not something that, should cause you to shoot up the fireworks, right? Hopefully that moment is still coming this offseason. Another question here from Smo. He says, what does this mean for McGee and Lindsay? Not saying either's a bad player, but they couldn't do much this year. Yeah, I've never been super high on Lindsay. I know Rajiv likes him a lot more. I think he can bring some shooting. Athletically, I think he's a little too limited, but maybe that was coming off an injury. Maybe in full another year healthy, we'll see a different player. McGee, I thought would be better this year. I thought he'd be quicker, to be honest, or at least use his quickness a little bit more. I was surprised that we didn't see him get into the paint a little bit more, draw some more contact, draw some more fouls. I mean, listen, bringing in another guard who is kind of a combo guard / point guard is certainly not good for McGee, right? That is certainly not good. Now, McGee's got more eligibility than Reynolds, so McGee's going to outlast him. But yeah, it's not a good thing. I'll tell you that. But this is also what you should be doing, right? You should be recruiting competition. And for as much as I liked Kamari McGee coming into the program last year, and I still have hope for him, and as much as Isaac Lindsay showed flashes, those two players should not be a barrier to bringing in better talent, right? So you bring in better talent and let them compete. We'll see who wins out. Let's keep going here. Mitch Piano Punster? Man, I don't know if I got that right. He said, I believe Paul Chryst lost his fire after Wisconsin lost to Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Night and day difference in his demeanor to me. Yeah, I don't know what happened. That Paul Chryst train derailment, that's one of the weirder things I've seen in a long time. And I would love to go back and maybe this summer when we have a little more time, we're going to go back and do more of a postmortem on that, because maybe it was after the Oregon game, but he definitely seemed to just lose some of the spark, right? Some of the anger or some of the competitiveness. And I don't know why, but I don't think we're the only ones that saw it, right? I think Max saw it too. Luke Verhaalen says, do you think that next year they will use Evers and Locke in different scenarios? So this is really interesting to me. I love this question because we talked about this even potentially this year. Could they use Mordecai as the drop back and then maybe as a wildcat or as just a change of pace, you bring in Evers and run some type of, quarterback bootleg with a pass option? Could they do it next year with Locke as the traditional drop back, Evers as the mobile quarterback? I don't think so, but Longo's pretty inventive offensively. So potentially there's a package in there. And the other thing that I think is interesting here is in the age of NIL, the age of transfer. Now, both these players have already transferred. So if they transferred again, they would lose a year. But you still have to keep players happy, right? So potentially, let's just say hypothetically, Locke wins the job. Potentially using Evers in a package is a way to keep both quarterbacks engaged and happy. It's an interesting thought. Let's see. Nick Flahive says Bryson Greene is a stud. He broke a tackle against Texas for a game-winning touchdown. This was during our receiver conversation yesterday. And the fact that we kind of said, man, we're not even talking about Bryson Greene. We're talking about Will Pauling and CJ Williams. Chimere had a nice day. Bryson Greene is, I said it when he committed, this is our receiver one this year. Our receiving unit looks great right now in practice, right? And I don't even think we're playing with our most polished, best weapon. Think about that. Like, your head explodes when you start thinking about the receiver talent on this team. Now, if an Ohio State fan tuned into this, they're like, please, we have 17 five-star receivers. But for us, for Wisconsin, to have this level of quality and quantity, I can't remember a room like it. So I'm incredibly excited for it. This is from CR. He said, great show, guys. I'm going to try to make it to the meet and greet. Excited for the spring game. This is the most amped I've been for a Badger season. The sky's the limit. I'm glad we added some depth. Let's go, CR. I hope to see you there at our party. I really do appreciate it. Again, we're doing on Friday, the day before the launch, 1 to 5. It's probably going to be 2 to 5. We will get out exact numbers. At Scotty Bar, we're going to be there. I'm going to be there. Rajiv is going to be there. Justin's going to be there. We're going to do a live show. We're going to drink beer, have some wings, talk Badgers. Let's do it. I hope you guys can make it. I would love to see you all there. Dan Pazdernick says, Wisconsin alumni living in Arizona really miss Spotted Cow. Launch party sounds awesome. Cheers and on Wisconsin. Thank you, my friend. And as a Wisconsin fan that was born in Arizona, I feel like we have multiple connections here, Dan. I was born in Tucson. I've lived alternately in Prescott, Flagstaff, Sedona, Chino Valley, all sorts of places in Arizona. So I think we have a connection here, Dan. I hope you're able to make the party. Bob Milborn says, Reynolds seems like another Kamari McGee. I don't think he is. So very different players, Bob. Now, maybe in the sense that, I'm curious. I would love for you to elaborate on your point, because is your point you think he's a transfer guard who's not going to contribute? Because that is a point worth discussing, but he's not the same type of player. If your point is he's the same type of player, this Reynolds is very different than McGee. Much bigger, taller, more established scorer, better around the rim. I think he's a better player. Now, I'm probably not the defensive nuisance McGee could be, but I think Reynolds is a better player. How much he will contribute in the Big Ten coming from playing at Wyoming? Now, that's a very valid question. This one is from TM3389. Looks like Sexton, that's Garrett Sexton, isn't coming to Wisconsin. He dropped his top 4. I'm guessing with Wisconsin not offering him, they feel pretty good with where they stand with Harrison and Cubberly. TM went on to name several other offensive line prospects, but I have a character limit for the comment. I think his overall point is correct. Like, Wisconsin, I think, is in a good spot to land a really strong offensive line class, especially when you talk about, obviously, you still have Nathan Roy, Donovan Harbor in state. There's a lot. They just landed Derek Jensen. They're in on a lot of prospects right now. I got to be honest, though. I think it's a mistake not offering Garrett Sexton. Like, listen, I don't know more about coaching the offensive line than Jack Bicknell Jr. I don't know more about football than Luke Fickell. However, I do know in-state offensive linemen that are 6'6" with an 85-inch wingspan and move like a deer, bury people on film, and have offers from Oklahoma, Tennessee, Penn State, Iowa, Stanford. Those dudes don't grow on trees. So it's very possible that there's some type of personal thing, not personal like a vendetta. Like, they didn't love maybe the character. I have no idea. I am not speculating. I'm just trying. I don't know why you would let him leave the state potentially. Because here's the thing. The question with him is, can you put on the weight? Let's say you can't, right? He's 250-ish right now. Let's say you can only get him up to 270, 280. Then just put him at defensive end. Then he's a 6'6", 280-pound defensive end with an 85-inch wingspan that can move. But if you can put the weight on a guy like Garrett Sexton, he's a first-round prototype. So I think it's a mistake, but certainly we will see what happens there. Gold Digger 65 says, Rajiv is preaching the truth about spring football. Justin's hilarious, talking about the Chryst 2-minute drill. Great show, Ryan. Oh, thank you, my friend. Thank you for tuning in. And here's another one from Gold Digger. He says, Gard needs to hit a couple out of the park to get people back on board. Not a great start to do that. I'd like to be optimistic, but very doubtful he can. Why? Because of his track record. That's why. Yeah, and this, again, it just loops back to the Noah Reynolds talk, who I think is more of a single, like a double, right? I don't think Noah Reynolds is the home run that's going to get people excited about this next year. Still a good player, though. Like, don't crush the kid. Like, he's going to help Wisconsin win basketball games next year. He's going to help the rotation. He lengthens the rotation. He adds offensive skill. Those are all really good things that this team needs, but this team can't be done, right? And I think I agree with your point on that, Gold Digger. It's a really good point. Craig Henrik says, Ryan, you were worried about middle linebackers last year, and I said they'd be okay, and they were. I'm going to tell you right now the D-line will be fine. First of all, Craig, thank you for listening to me for over a year. That's incredible. There is not many people that listen to me for that long. So you were right. I was worried about middle linebackers last year, and they were fine. So, yeah, so here's the thing with the D-line this year, and I've talked about it. I think they're stout. I think they're going to be great against the run. I don't know if there's a playmaker in that entire group. And as much as we hear the buzz, we hear James Thompson and, let's see, who's the other one that we just heard some buzz on? Not James Thompson Jr. Rodis Johnson. Someone was saying Rodis Johnson looks great. He looks quick. That's what we've been hearing for years on the defensive line. And we just haven't seen any of these guys emerge. So I'm hopeful. I think Darian Varner, the transfer, could be that guy. We got to get him healthy to see. I'm going to wait and see what the defensive line is where I'm at. But Craig, you could be right again, my friend. And if you do, please come back and let me know. Jackson Acker is going to have an impact as an H-back. This is from Slim Lewis. People forget how athletic he is. He ran a 10.9 100 in high school. Chris bulked him up to play traditional fullback. He will thrive in Phil Longo's system. I hope so. Listen, Luke Fickell talked very highly about Jackson, right? He said, a heck of a football player from watching film last year. We're going to find ways to use him in this offense. And, I don't think that's just coach speak, right? I think there is something there. He's a bigger athlete. Bigger athletes can always kind of find a way if the offensive coordinator is creative, right? And we haven't had a lot of creativity recently. We do now. So, yeah, I think he could have an impact. I'm just not sure if everybody's healthy where his carries or his touches would come from, right? Because certainly Braylon Allen, Ches Malusi getting the bulk, and then you have 5 receivers to feed, and it sounds like Jack Pugh is doing well. Clay Cundiff's going to come back. I just don't know where those touches come from. But he certainly is the type of athlete that can be productive on the football field. So, yeah, I love it. All right, that is most of the comments I had written down. I still didn't even get to all of them, guys, which is just, again, reflective of how amazing this community is. But I hope that I was able to get to a lot of them. I hope I was able to kind of fulfill the promise/goal I have of getting your thoughts onto the show and responding to them. I read every comment, by the way, even if I don't respond. Sometimes I get overwhelmed time-wise, but I read every single thing because if you take the time to put something out there, I'm going to read it. So really do appreciate everybody on Wisconsin. Let's keep this thing going, and we'll talk tomorrow.